Journalist Javed Rana joins us live from Islamabad, Pakistan, to discuss the latest updates from the Gaza and Lebanon crisis. Good to see you, Javed. Now, what steps are being taken by international organizations to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Lebanon?
I think the bigger question is not what steps are being taken to address the starvation in Gaza. Bigger question is why those UN agencies, other aid providing agencies, other NGOs are not being allowed to get into Gaza to provide all fundamental basic help that people in Gaza badly need. That is a bigger question, because there is no dearth, there is no shortage of aid. There is certainly, what is the crisis is, that in a very systematic manner, in a grossly inhumanitarian manner, the apartheid state has been blocking most of the aid that was supposed to trickle in Gaza. This is not happening. The UNRWA, the biggest UN agency, which has been taking care of Palestinians, millions of Palestinians, not only in Gaza, not only in occupied West Bank, not only in the East Jerusalem, but also across the region, wherever the Palestinians are. All those refugees' needs are being met by the UNRWA. And that has been banned with the latest legislation in the Israeli parliament. That is the biggest crisis. So now what is happening in Gaza? Very limited aid is being trickled down, despite the fact that there are queues on the Egyptian borders. Trucks are there, but that aid is not being allowed to trickle in. And at the heart of the problem is a very systematic policy, systematic strategy, how to create conditions inside Gaza where people, the remaining people, are forced, they are compelled to leave Gaza. Now, since Egypt has straight away blocked the entire border because Egypt doesn't want to entertain any Palestinian. So now Israel is creating conditions, and it is willing to facilitate people from Gaza to leave to the African countries or to the Europe. Naval ships are there. So that is their next target. That is why we have seen that the aid was not allowed to trickle in particularly in the Northern Gaza, where there has been a clear starvation campaign. The food is being used as a weapon by the apartheid state, and it has used very effectively. I'm sure you and many in the international community, they would have seen dozens of pictures, hundreds of pictures of the infants, the children, who you will just see their skeleton. They don't have anything on their body. They're being starved to death. And it is happening in a very, very systematic manner.
Now, how does the current escalation compare to past conflicts in terms of intensity and civilian impact?
Well, I think in a broader picture, I don't recall any conflict, any war in the recent history where this scale of disaster and this scale of genocide was created in a very systematic manner. The last episode that is there, and that is how the Holocaust was conducted by the German Hitler in the World War II. From there onwards, I cannot recall any other episode. Yes, there have been other destructions and the humanitarian disaster in the World War II. But in the recent history, what is happening now as a result of a genocidal war in Gaza, that is unprecedented. We can look at what happened in Afghanistan. There were 20 years long war, and around 250,000 people were killed in 20 years long war. And then in Iraq, yes, from 90 till now, millions have died directly or indirectly. Tens of thousands were killed. But look at the short span of time. It's 1 year, little more than 1 year since Israel launched its genocidal war. 43,000 people have been killed. More than 100,000 people have been maimed or they have been injured, they are disabled. Generations after generation, not one generation, generations after generations have been eliminated. Most of the hospitals have been razed to the ground. Uh, Nearly 1,000 schools and colleges have been razed to the ground. 80 to 90% residential structure, the business structure have been razed to the ground. No university, almost there is no university now. 12,000 students of the universities and the colleges and the schools, those have been killed. Other than that, 20,000 children have been killed. And then where are the Hamas members of the Hamas? Where are their fighters? How many of them are killed? They are declaring these civilians as the members of the Hamas. We cannot make distinction how many of them were killed. So in a broader picture, when there is a systematic strategy, a systematic policy, then the scale of this disaster is unprecedented. And then the last time it was in World War II when there was a nuclear bomb which were exploded in two cities of Japan, Nagasaki and Hiroshima. The load of the amount of the explosive that was used in those nuclear bombs, I think more than 7 to 10%, 7 to 10 times more explosives have been thrown upon to the people of Gaza. They are not even being considered as animal. Israel has been calling them that they are human animal, but they are not even treating them as animal. Can you imagine that you can kill people like this in Europe? It is unimaginable. Even you cannot imagine that the insects can be killed like this. Forget about the animals, there are animal rights. Palestinians don't have even those rights. They are being treated like insects. And even in the civilized societies, you cannot kill insects like this.
Now, what
it's
option?
a carpet bombing. The last point I want to make.
Sure.
The recent comparison that we can make, and that is what is happening in conflict between Ukraine and Russia. The number of the people they were killed around 10 to 20 to 13,000. Around 40,000 people were injured. The figure that I'm giving you of a war which had been fought over the period of 2.5 years, around 2.5 years. So this is by all yardsticks, by all standards, it is unprecedented.
Now, what options do regional and global leaders have to de-escalate the situation and prevent further loss of life?
Well, we have discussed repeatedly in this very show and elsewhere that all the options have been exhausted out. The regional countries, the so-called OIC, the so-called Arab League, so-called UN Security Council, and UN General Assembly, none of them has come up to the very cause for which they were created. UN Security Council is straight away a tool in the hands of the Zionists. They are using it in a very effective manner. Americans have turned out to be their partners in crime in a systematic manner. Now everybody is looking at President-elect Donald Trump, what policy and strategy he would have in place when it comes to Israel and Gaza and Lebanon conflict. Let's face the reality as it exists. There would not be any meaningful change in the US policy. It's a change of face. There may be some change of strategy. It may be more blunt support for the apartheid state. And unlike the Biden administration, which has introduced in a very systematic manner hypocrisy as an instrument of the foreign policy, this is beyond any iota of doubt a terrible situation, a biggest humanitarian crisis in the recent history, and genocide, Holocaust, But since these are Muslims, these are Palestinians, nobody is looking at them. World is silent. Europe is silent. They are supplying all kind of weapons. They established an air bridge during last 1 year. More than 12,000 flights have been conducted of these supplies of the weapons.
Now, what
this
are
this is a terrible situation. And then I want to just talk about Donald Trump. His son-in-law is an extremist Jewish, Zionist. And I have seen his videos. He's basically real estate agent. He wants to depopulate Gaza. He wants to clear up all these debris and establish settlement there. Now, Donald Trump wants to create his image, somebody who's against the war. He wants to wind down the war. But bigger question is, will he apply the same criteria on the Middle East, which he intends to apply on the Ukraine-Russia conflict? If apartheid state is given impunity once again, then remember, there would be reaction. There would be reaction. Donald Trump came up with the idea of the so-called Abraham Accord. And that accord means the Golan Heights, which is essentially a Syrian territory. It was formally, diplomatically accepted, recognized by the Washington. In a similar fashion, East Jerusalem was recognized by the USA as part of Israel. So, and then many Arab countries with Americans under Donald Trump use its pressure and influence to force them to recognize Israel. Donald Trump, my understanding of the situation is, wants to apply the same policy, that same dead tool. Had there been not Abraham Accord, this October 7th military operation by Hamas would not have taken place. This Donald Trump's policy had left no option with the Palestinians. They were left with no option. That is why this military operation was conducted. And now the international community is leaving no option with the Palestinians. They will resort for another extreme option, which does not abode well for this region. This in the Middle East would explode up. It is simply a matter of time.
Now, what are the long-term implications of this violence for the peace process and stability in the Middle East?
Well, the peace process cannot be one-sided. The Donald Trump's policy, going by the track record, has always been basically not to create the Palestinian state. He doesn't believe in the two-state solution because that is what we have seen. He will pursue Netanyahu's agenda if the track record is any evidence, whereby they want to enslave Palestinians. They want to keep them under their occupation and create conditions where Palestinians are deported from their own land in a very systematic manner, so that rest of the Palestinian territory is also occupied. That is a part and parcel of a greater Israel agenda. And let me just give you as kind of a theological background. Donald Trump represents basically evangelical Christians, and I think they runs into tens of millions. Some statistics are saying that probably there are 62 million in the USA. They have established different organizations. They've been funding these settlement projects. They've been funding this war. They are using their influence onto the White House and the Pentagon to continue this supplies of the weapons with which Palestinians are killed. Their theological agenda is that by supporting the apartheid extremist Zionist state, they would hasten the arrival of Isa, who's a prophet of Islam also, and then all these Jews would be killed. That is their theological part of mindset, and that is why they believe that they are hastening the killing of the Jews, because it is the only Jesus who is going to kill them? This is kind of theological pattern of thinking exists of a constituency that Donald Trump represent. But at the same time, we have to see that he's been projecting himself as an anti-war leader, and then he has also promised with the Muslim community and the Arab community that he's going to bring an end to this war. But the bigger question is on whose terms and conditions? On terms and conditions whereby this peace is established, on the terms and conditions whereby a Palestinian state is created, or on the terms and conditions which would further enslave Palestinians.
Now, Republican Donald Trump's election win is being celebrated by Israel's government, but not Palestinians and others in the region under Israeli attack. What does Trump win mean for Israel, Palestinians, and the Middle East?
There is a deafening silence in Gaza when it comes to the Trump's presidency. There is a deafening silence in the occupied West Bank and occupied East Jerusalem, because simply they don't know, because they don't know what is going to happen. But what they do know, that the Donald Trump's track record has not been so good and so favorable to them. Donald Trump blocked their funding to the Palestinian Authority when he was president, and now he's returning with the promise to wind down this war. Netanyahu is very happy that his close friend Donald Trump has returned to power. And then remember what Netanyahu has been saying, and other Israeli leaders has been saying. They are saying that the way Donald Trump facilitated their aims and objectives, strategic objectives, no American leaders did that. It is unprecedented. So they are having a high hopes. So that is why there is a deafening silence in the occupied territories. But remember, these are Palestinians. They have a track record. From 1948 till now, they've been resisting. And they would continue to resist. If Donald Trump and Netanyahu believe that they can make their way the way they want it, it's not going to happen. They can do one thing, and that is a fear most, and that is a Iranian factor. Because now the pattern of the war has changed altogether in the Middle East. Now Iran and Israel have been directly attacking each other. It was not happening. Iran was operating through their proxies like Hezbollah, like Younis Houthis group. Now what is happening? Iran and Israel are directly attacking each other. So it needs just one small spark. And that spark would mean a nuclear war in the Middle East. That spark would mean that the annihilation of not only apartheid structure of Israel, but also many other countries in the Middle East, or these neighboring countries, particularly these Arab countries, who are silent partner of Netanyahu. They don't want Hamas to retain power again. They don't want it. The reason being is they feel threatened because Hamas is basically an offshoot of Muslim Brotherhood. They believe that if Hamas is allowed to remain in power in Gaza, or if it is allowed to come back to the power again, once again, if there is a peace settlement, that would be recipe for disaster for them, because Muslim Brotherhood have already their secretive branches in all these Arab countries. Public support is with them, and then it will be a kind of a revolution that Arab countries, Arab Norths are very fearful. You may recall what happened in Egypt. President Morsi who was he? He was from Muslim Brotherhood. And whenever there are elections, supposedly in any fantasy imagination that we can have, in any Arab countries, Muslim Brotherhood would lead those elections. That is a fear. They want to eliminate Hamas at the cost of killing up tens of thousands of Palestinians. And I think they are meeting their objectives. To the extent of killing Palestinians, Hamas would not be eliminated. It is a cause, it is an ideology which would stay there.
Javed Rana, thank you for your analysis and thank you for joining NewsHour.
growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.